My name is Rachel and I am 36 years old. 3 weeks ago, my stepsister Amber sent me 70 explicit photos of herself with my husband. She expected me to cry, beg, and fall apart. Instead, I spent 2 weeks creating a professional presentation with every single photo, text message, financial transaction, and timeline of their year-long affair. Last Saturday at my father's retirement party, I played that presentation on the big screen in front of 75 family members and friends. The room erupted in chaos that destroyed multiple relationships in under 15 minutes. Before I tell you exactly what happened when my husband and stepsister saw themselves on that screen, drop a comment telling me where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe right now, because this is about what happens when someone mistakes your silence for weakness. I grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in a middle-class family. My mother died of cancer when I was 12 years old. It was just my father and me for several years, and we were very close. He was a civil engineer who worked hard to provide for us and to be both mother and father after my mom died. We supported each other through the grief and built a strong relationship. When I was 16, my father started dating again. He met a woman named Patricia at a work conference. Patricia was recently divorced with a daughter named Amber, who was 14, 2 years younger than me. My father and Patricia dated for about a year before getting married. I was happy my father had found someone, though I was cautious about suddenly having a stepmother and stepsister. The relationship with Patricia was always somewhat distant but cordial. She was never cruel, but she was never warm either. She treated me politely, but made clear that her primary focus was her own daughter Amber. I understood this and did not expect her to replace my mother. I was civil and respectful, which seemed to satisfy everyone. Amber was a different story. From the moment we met, there was tension. Amber was beautiful, outgoing, and manipulative. She knew how to charm adults while being cruel to peers. She was jealous of my close relationship with my father and worked constantly to undermine it. She would lie about things I supposedly said or did. She would play victim to get attention and sympathy. My father saw through some of Amber's manipulation, but Patricia was completely blind to her daughter's behavior. Patricia believed everything Amber said and defended her constantly. This created ongoing tension in our blended family. I learned to document things Amber claimed I did so I could prove they were lies. I learned to keep my distance and interact with her as little as possible. I left for college at 18, attending the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I studied marketing and business, graduating with honors. I was grateful to have physical distance from Amber and the complicated family dynamics. I came home for holidays, but kept visits brief. My father and I remained close through phone calls and visits without Patricia and Amber present. After college, I got a job with a marketing firm in Milwaukee. I built a successful career in digital marketing and brand strategy. I was promoted steadily, and by my late 20s was a senior marketing manager, earning over $90,000 annually. I was independent, successful, and content with my life. I met my husband Derek when I was 29. He was a sales representative for a medical equipment company, calling on the hospital system my firm was working with on a marketing project. We met at a client meeting and he asked me to dinner afterward. He was charming, attractive, and seemed genuinely interested in me. We dated for 2 years before getting married. The wedding was beautiful, though there was tension with Amber attending. She was 27 at the time and recently divorced from a brief marriage. She showed up to my wedding in an inappropriate white dress and flirted shamelessly with several male guests, including Derek's friends. I ignored her behavior because I was not going to let her ruin my day. Derek and I settled into married life in a suburb of Milwaukee. He traveled frequently for his medical sales job. I continued working at my marketing firm. We were comfortable financially combining our incomes to buy a nice house and save for the future. The first few years of marriage were happy and stable. Family gatherings continued to be complicated by Amber. She had moved back in with Patricia and my father after her divorce. She worked sporadically at retail jobs, but mostly relied on her mother for financial support. She was jealous of my success in my marriage. She made cutting comments about my appearance, my career, my life choices. I ignored her as much as possible. Amber's behavior toward Derek was problematic from the beginning. She flirted with him openly at family gatherings. She would touch his arm, laugh too loudly at his jokes, find excuses to be physically close to him. Derek seemed uncomfortable, but dismissed it as harmless when I mentioned it. He said she was just young and immature, and I should not take it seriously. Around our 4th anniversary, Derek's travel schedule increased significantly. He was gone 3 or 4 days a week visiting hospitals and medical facilities throughout the Midwest. He said his company was expanding territory, and he needed to work harder to maintain his sales numbers. This seemed plausible, and I supported his career ambitions. What I did not know was that Derek had been having an affair with Amber for over a year at that point. They had started seeing each other at a family gathering where I had stayed home sick with flu. Derek had attended alone, and Amber had apparently made her move. They began meeting secretly whenever Derek was supposedly traveling for work. I had no suspicion initially. Derek was attentive when he was home. Our intimate life was normal. He showed no obvious signs of affair. Amber continued her usual behavior at family gatherings, which had always been inappropriately flirtatious, so nothing seemed different. I was completely unaware that my husband and stepsister were betraying me systematically. The first hint of something wrong came about 6 months ago. I noticed charges on our joint credit card for hotels and restaurants in cities where Derek claimed he was staying with clients or at corporate housing. When I asked about these charges, he said expenses were not always covered, and sometimes he had to pay out of pocket and get reimbursed later. This seemed odd but not impossible. Then I noticed he was getting text messages at odd hours that he would quickly dismiss. When I asked who was texting, he said it was work or friends. He started keeping his phone face down and taking it with him everywhere, even to the bathroom. These were classic signs of affair, but I did not want to believe Derek would cheat on me. I started paying closer attention. I noticed he smelled different sometimes when he came home from trips. Different perfume, different soap. He claimed hotels all had different products. I noticed he was distracted and distant even when physically present. He claimed work stress. I noticed unexplained expenses and time gaps in his travel schedule. He always had explanations that were plausible, but increasingly suspicious. About 4 months ago, I decided to check our cell phone account online. I discovered Derek had been texting and calling one number excessively, hundreds of texts daily. Long phone calls. This number was saved in his phone under a male coworker's name, but the usage pattern was clearly not professional. This was the number of someone he was intimate with. I did not confront Derek immediately. I had learned from dealing with Amber to document everything before acting. I started screenshotting the phone records. I started noting his travel schedule and comparing it to actual work commitments I could verify. I started checking credit card statements more carefully. I was building a case. I hired a private investigator 8 weeks ago. I gave him Derek's travel schedule and the suspicious phone number. Within a week, he had photographs of Derek meeting a woman at various hotels. The photographs showed them arriving separately, going to hotel rooms together, emerging hours later. The photographs showed intimate touches, kisses, obvious affair behavior. The private investigator identified the woman. It was Amber, my stepsister. The woman who had been jealous of me since we were teenagers. The woman who had flirted with my husband at every family gathering. She had been sleeping with Derek for over a year, meeting him at hotels when he was supposedly traveling for work. I felt physically sick looking at the evidence. The betrayal from Derek was devastating. The betrayal from Amber was infuriating. She had deliberately targeted my husband because she was jealous of my life. This was not just a affair, this was calculated destruction by someone who had always resented me. I did not cry or fall apart. I got coldly, furiously strategic. I contacted a divorce attorney and began preparing to file. I moved money from joint accounts into accounts only I controlled. I secured all important documents and personal items. I continued acting normal at home while planning my exit and revenge. Then 3 weeks ago, Amber made her fatal mistake. She sent me 70 explicit photos of herself with Derek. The photos showed them in various hotel rooms, clearly intimate, clearly engaged in affair. She included a message saying she thought I should know Derek preferred her, that I should step aside gracefully, that she and Derek wanted to be together openly. This was Amber's attempt to break me publicly and claim victory. She expected me to cry rage, beg Derek to stay, make a scene. She wanted the satisfaction of destroying my marriage and humiliating me. What she did not understand was that she had just given me exactly what I needed for the perfect revenge. I looked at the 70 photos Amber had sent me with cold calculation. Each photo was evidence. Each photo was ammunition. She had been foolish enough to document her affair thoroughly, and then hand me that documentation expecting it would destroy me. Instead, it would destroy her and Derek publicly and completely. I immediately backed up all 70 photos to multiple secure locations. I sent copies to my attorney. I sent copies to my private investigator. I ensured they could not be deleted or lost. Then I thanked Amber via text for the photos, saying they were very helpful. She responded confused, asking what I meant. I did not reply. Let her wonder. I spent the next day organizing everything I had gathered over months of investigation. Phone records showing thousands of texts and calls between Derek and Amber. Credit card statements showing hotel and restaurant charges on days Derek claimed to be at work events. Private investigator photos showing them arriving at hotels together. Bank records showing Derek had given Amber over $15,000 over the course of the affair. Everything was documented and organized chronologically. Then I did something Amber would never expect. I used my professional marketing skills to create a presentation. A thorough, professional, devastating presentation that told the story of their year-long affair using their own evidence. Every photo they took, every text they sent, every hotel they visited, every dollar Derek spent on her, all organized into a clear narrative with dates, locations, and receipts. The presentation was designed like a corporate strategy presentation. Clean design, clear headers, factual text, damning evidence on every slide. I titled it Derek and Amber, A Timeline of Betrayal. I included 70 slides, one for each of the explicit photos Amber sent me, plus additional slides for phone records, credit card statements, bank transfers, and private investigator photos. I worked on this presentation for 2 weeks. I made it perfect. Every slide supported by documentation, every claim backed by evidence. I added a final slide showing the total financial cost of the affair. $15,000 given to Amber directly, $20,000 in hotel and travel expenses, $35,000 total that Derek had stolen from our marital assets to fund his affair with my stepsister. During these 2 weeks, I acted completely normal at home. I cooked dinner, asked about Derek's day, slept beside him at night. He had no idea I knew everything. He had no idea what was coming. Amber kept texting me asking if I had thought about her message. I ignored her. Let her think I was processing and weak. Let her believe she had won. I also made strategic plans for after the reveal. I had my attorney ready to file divorce papers immediately. I had already moved half of our joint savings into an account only I controlled. I had secured all important personal documents and items. I had changed passwords on all my accounts. I was prepared to leave immediately after executing my plan. The perfect opportunity came when my father announced his retirement party. He was retiring after 40 years as a civil engineer and wanted to celebrate with family and friends. He rented a venue, invited 75 people, including extended family, colleagues, and friends. It would be held on a Saturday evening with dinner, drinks, and speeches. Derek and I were invited, of course. Patricia and Amber were invited as family. All my aunts, uncles, cousins were invited. Derek's parents and siblings were invited. My father's colleagues were invited. Everyone who mattered to my father would be there, and everyone would have front row seats to what I was about to reveal. The venue had a large screen and projector for showing photos and videos during the speeches. My father had asked me to help prepare a presentation about his career with old photos and memories. I agreed enthusiastically. I prepared 2 presentations. One was the legitimate career retrospective my father requested. The other was my revenge presentation. I coordinated with the venue to ensure I would have access to the audiovisual equipment. I arrived early on the day of the party with both presentations loaded on my laptop. I tested the equipment and confirmed everything worked perfectly. The screen was large and visible from everywhere in the room. The sound system was excellent. Everything was ready. Guests arrived around 6 p.m. My father was happy and excited, greeting everyone warmly. Patricia and Amber arrived together. Amber looked smug, shooting me knowing glances. She clearly thought I was weak and broken. Derek arrived directly from work. He smiled and played the devoted husband, having no idea his world was about to detonate. Dinner was served, and everyone ate and drank and celebrated my father's retirement. Speeches began around 8 p.m. Colleagues told funny stories about working with my father. Family members shared memories. Everyone was relaxed and happy. My father looked touched by the tributes. Around 8:30, it was my turn to present the career retrospective. I walked to the front with my laptop. I connected it to the projector. The screen lit up behind me. I said I had prepared a special presentation about my father's career and about family. Everyone settled in to watch, expecting a sentimental slideshow. I clicked to the first slide, but instead of old photos of my father, the screen showed the title slide of my revenge presentation. Derek and Amber, a timeline of betrayal. The room went silent. People looked confused. Derek's face went white. Amber looked confused, then scared as she realized what was happening. I said loudly and clearly that before celebrating my father's retirement, I wanted to share something important about family and loyalty. That some family members understood those values and others did not. That everyone present was about to learn who was who. I clicked to the next slide. The second slide showed the first explicit photo Amber had sent me. Her and Derek in a hotel room, clearly intimate. The room erupted in gasps and shocked exclamations. My father stood up looking confused and angry. Patricia screamed, asking what this was. Derek jumped up from his seat, shouting for me to stop. Amber went completely white. I said calmly that everyone should stay seated because there were 69 more slides to go. I clicked to the next slide, another explicit photo, then another. I moved through the slides methodically, letting each image stay on screen for 5 full seconds. Explicit photo after explicit photo that Amber herself had sent me, expecting I would cry privately. Instead, 75 people were seeing them on a 10-foot screen. The room was chaos. People were shouting. Derek was trying to get to the projector, but 2 of my cousins physically blocked him. Amber was crying and screaming for me to stop. Patricia was yelling that this was inappropriate. My father was standing frozen, staring at the screen in absolute horror and betrayal. I said loudly over the noise that Amber had sent me these 70 photos 3 weeks ago, thinking they would break me. That she had written that she thought I should know Derek preferred her. That I should step aside gracefully. I said I wanted everyone here to know exactly what kind of person my stepsister was. That this was not random affair, this was calculated targeting of my marriage by someone who had been jealous of me for 20 years. I clicked past the explicit photos to slides showing phone records. Thousands of texts and calls between Derek and Amber over a year. I pointed out the dates. I pointed out the frequency. I noted that some calls lasted over an hour, clearly not accidental or innocent. I showed everyone the pattern of constant communication that proved extended affair. I clicked to credit card statements, charges for hotels, restaurants, gifts. I had highlighted each relevant charge in yellow. I walked through the timeline showing that on dates, Derek told me he was traveling for work. He was actually meeting Amber at hotels. That he had lied to me systematically for over a year. That every business trip was a lie covering affair. I clicked to bank records showing transfers from Derek to Amber, $15,000 over the course of the affair. Money from our joint marital accounts that Derek had stolen to give his mistress. I noted each transfer date and amount. I said Derek had stolen from our marriage to fund his affair with my stepsister. I clicked to private investigator photos. Images of Derek and Amber entering hotels together, kissing in parking lots, holding hands, embracing. All date stamped and location stamped, all proving systematic ongoing affair. I explained I had hired a private investigator 8 weeks ago when I first became suspicious. That everything on this presentation was documented fact. I clicked to the final slide. A summary showing 1-year affair timeline, 70 explicit photos they took themselves, $15,000 in cash payments, $20,000 in hotel and travel expenses, $35,000 total cost to marital assets, and the words divorce papers filed this morning with copies provided to both Derek and Amber tomorrow morning. The room was absolute chaos. Derek had stopped trying to get to the projector and had collapsed into a chair looking devastated. Amber was sobbing hysterically, mascara running down her face. Patricia was screaming at me that I had humiliated her daughter publicly. My father looked like someone had punched him repeatedly. I said calmly that I wanted everyone present to understand several things. First, Derek and I were done. Divorce papers were filed. I was leaving tonight and he would never see me again except through attorneys. Second, Amber had not stolen my husband. She was welcome to Derek, they deserved each other. Third, I was done with this family and the toxicity that had allowed this to happen. I looked at Patricia and said she had enabled Amber's behavior for years, that she had made excuses for her daughter's cruelty and manipulation since we were teenagers, that she had raised someone who thought sleeping with her stepsister's husband was acceptable, that this outcome was partly Patricia's fault for never teaching her daughter basic decency. I looked at my father and said I loved him, but I was done with family gatherings that included Patricia and Amber, that I would maintain relationship with him individually, but I would never again attend events where they were present, that he needed to decide whether he was okay with what his stepdaughter had done, or whether he had any sense of loyalty to his actual daughter. I looked at Derek and said he was pathetic, that he had thrown away 5 years of marriage for affair with someone as shallow and manipulative as Amber, that he would realize eventually what he had lost, but it would be too late, that I hoped affair was worth it because it cost him everything. I unplugged my laptop and walked out of the venue. Several family members followed me out, including my aunt and 2 cousins. They said they were disgusted by Derek and Amber and proud of how I handled it. They said I had every right to expose the affair publicly given how deliberately cruel Amber had been sending those photos. I drove home, threw predetermined bags into my car that I had packed earlier, and drove to a hotel. I had already arranged temporary housing for the next month while I figured out permanent plans. I would not spend another night in the house I shared with Derek. That chapter was over completely. The aftermath of the presentation was immediate and devastating for Derek and Amber. By the next morning, everyone at the party had told everyone they knew. The story spread through extended family friend groups and community connections. Derek and Amber were publicly shamed by dozens of people who had seen the presentation or heard about it from attendees. My attorney served Derek with divorce papers Monday morning at his workplace. His colleagues and boss saw him being served, which was humiliating for him. The papers demanded 50% of all marital assets plus reimbursement for the $35,000 he had spent on the affair. I was claiming financial infidelity and emotional distress damages. Amber was served with a civil lawsuit for alienation of affection. While this tort did not exist in Wisconsin where we lived, I had my attorney draft the lawsuit anyway and serve her publicly at her workplace. Even though it could not proceed legally, the act of serving her was public humiliation. Her co-workers and managers saw her served with papers detailing her affair with her stepsister's husband. Derek tried to contact me dozens of times. Calls, texts, emails, all begging me to talk to him, saying the affair was a mistake, saying he loved me and wanted to fix our marriage, saying Amber had pursued him and he had been weak. I did not respond to any of it. My attorney handled all communication. I blocked Derek's number and email. Amber also tried contacting me. Her messages were less apologetic and more angry. She said I had humiliated her publicly and destroyed her reputation. She said I was cruel and vindictive. She said I had ruined her life over a mistake. I did not respond. She had sent me 70 explicit photos expecting to destroy me. I had simply returned that energy publicly. Patricia called me screaming that I had destroyed Amber's reputation and mental health, that the public humiliation was cruel and unwarranted, that I should have handled this privately. I laughed at this. Amber had tried to handle it publicly by sending me explicit photos. I had simply chosen a different venue for publicity. Patricia hung up when I pointed out she had enabled Amber's behavior forever. My father called devastated and apologetic. He said he had no idea the affair was happening, that he was disgusted by both Derek and Amber, that he understood if I needed distance from family. He said he told Patricia that Amber was not welcome in his house anymore, and that Patricia needed to decide whether she was going to enable her daughter's behavior or acknowledge reality. This created massive conflict between my father and Patricia. She demanded he support Amber and condemned me for the public humiliation. He refused and said Amber had brought this on herself by deliberately targeting her stepsister's marriage and then sending explicit photos. Their marriage became extremely strained, possibly beyond repair. Extended family overwhelmingly supported me. Aunts, uncles, cousins all reached out saying they were proud of how I handled it. That public exposure was justified given Amber's deliberate cruelty. Several family members cut off contact with Amber and Patricia entirely. The family fractured along clear lines of people who understood why I did what I did, versus people who thought I was too harsh. Derek's family also reached out to me. His parents apologized profusely for their son's behavior. His sister called crying, saying she was ashamed of her brother. They said they supported my decision to divorce and hoped I would maintain relationship with them separate from Derek. I appreciated this, but told them I needed space from anything connected to Derek for now. The divorce proceeded quickly because everything was documented. Derek could not contest fault. The evidence was overwhelming and public. His attorney advised him to settle quickly and favorably to minimize further damage. Within 3 months, the divorce was final. I received half of all assets, plus the $35,000 reimbursement for affair expenses. I also kept my full retirement accounts and investments. Derek's career suffered significantly. His company learned about the affair through gossip after the presentation. While they could not fire him for personal behavior, they removed him from high-profile accounts and reduced his territory. His reputation as reliable professional was damaged. His income declined substantially as a result. Amber's life fell apart completely. She lost her retail job when her employer learned about the affair through community gossip. She could not find other employment because her reputation preceded her. She had to move out of Patricia's house when my father demanded it. She moved in with Derek, which was grimly fitting. They deserved each other. Derek and Amber's relationship did not last. Within 6 months of my divorce being final, they had broken up. Turned out affair was exciting as secret but miserable as actual relationship. They blamed each other for the consequences they faced. Derek resented that Amber sent the photos that triggered my presentation. Amber resented that Derek did not protect her from consequences. They split bitterly. I rebuilt my life systematically. I bought a condo in downtown Milwaukee with my divorce settlement. I was promoted to marketing director at my firm with significant salary increase. I focused on my career, my friendships, and my own well-being. I started therapy to process the betrayal and to understand what I wanted going forward. I maintained relationship with my father, but on my terms. We met for lunch monthly, just the two of us. He never brought up Patricia or Amber unless I asked. He eventually separated from Patricia 18 months after my presentation, unable to reconcile her continued defense of Amber's behavior with his loyalty to me. They divorced after 20 years of marriage. My father told me later that Patricia never accepted that Amber had done anything truly wrong, that Patricia viewed me as vindictive for the public presentation and blamed me for destroying Amber's reputation. That Patricia could not see that Amber had destroyed her own reputation through her choices. This fundamental disagreement ended their marriage. I felt no guilt about my father's divorce. Patricia had chosen to enable Amber's behavior forever. She had chosen to defend the indefensible. She had chosen her daughter over basic morality. The consequences were her own. My father had chosen integrity and loyalty to his actual daughter. I respected that choice. Amber eventually moved to another state trying to escape her reputation. She worked low-wage jobs and struggled financially. Derek heard through mutual connections that she blamed everyone but herself for outcomes, that she still believed she had been treated unfairly, that she still thought I had been too cruel with the public presentation. She learned nothing. Derek also struggled post-divorce. He went through several relationships that ended badly. He gained significant weight and looked older than his years. Mutual acquaintances who saw him said he looked defeated and sad. He apparently told people he regretted the affair and wished he could undo it. But regret does not undo damage. 5 years after the presentation at my father's retirement party, I reflected on everything that happened. The betrayal had been devastating initially, but I had survived and thrived. I had extracted justice publicly in a way that satisfied something deep in me. I had not been the crying victim Amber expected. I had been the strategic destroyer of her reputation and relationship. People ask me sometimes if I regretted the public presentation, if I thought I had been too harsh or cruel. I said absolutely not. Amber had sent me 70 explicit photos expecting to break me publicly and claim my husband as trophy. She had calculated cruelty. I had simply chosen a different venue to make the affair public than she expected. She wanted me crying alone. I chose to cry publicly with context and support. The presentation ensured that everyone who knew us understood what happened. There was no ambiguity. Derek could not spin it as us growing apart or me being cold. Amber could not spin it as Derek pursuing her while I neglected him. The evidence was comprehensive and public. Everyone knew exactly what they had done and for how long. The presentation also gave me power in a situation where I felt powerless. Discovery of affair is devastating. You feel betrayed, foolish, embarrassed. Creating and delivering that presentation transformed me from victim to agent. I was not passive recipient of their cruelty. I was active demolisher of their reputations. That transformation was psychologically powerful. I also believed public consequences were appropriate for public figures. Derek and Amber conducted their affair publicly enough that a private investigator photographed them easily. They took photos of themselves, and Amber sent those photos to me. They involved family gatherings where Amber flirted openly. This was not discreet private affair. Public exposure was proportionate response. Some people said I should have handled it privately for the sake of family harmony. I disagreed. Family harmony that requires victims to stay silent protects perpetrators at victims' expense. Amber had counted on me staying silent out of embarrassment. Making it public eliminated that protection and forced accountability. The presentation also protected me from future manipulation. Amber could not later claim I misunderstood or exaggerated. Derek could not claim it was brief lapse in judgment. Everything was documented with dates, amounts, photos, receipts. Reality was established beyond any dispute. This protected me from gaslighting and revision. I recognized that my choice was not for everyone. Some people would have divorced quietly and moved on. Some people would have forgiven and attempted reconciliation. Those were valid choices for other people in different circumstances. For me, given Amber's calculated cruelty in sending those photos expecting tears' public presentation was exactly right. I also recognized that Amber sending me those photos was a gift, though she did not intend it that way. She documented the affair thoroughly and then handed me that documentation. Without those photos, I would have had to rely on private investigator photos alone. With her photos, I had comprehensive visual evidence of year-long affair. Her arrogance was my ammunition. The presentation became somewhat famous in divorce and infidelity forums online. Someone at the party had recorded video of the screen showing my slides. That video was posted online and went viral. Thousands of people commented that they wished they had thought of similar exposure, that public accountability for affair was justified and satisfying to witness. I received messages from strangers thanking me for showing that victims could take power back, that we did not have to be passive recipients of betrayal, that strategic documented public exposure was valid response to calculated cruelty. Many people said my presentation inspired them to demand accountability in their own situations. I also received criticism from people who thought public humiliation was wrong regardless of circumstances. Who thought I was vindictive and cruel? Who thought Derek and Amber deserved privacy even though they chose affair? I respected their right to their opinions, but disagreed. Privacy protects perpetrators. Publicity protects victims by establishing reality publicly. The key insight I wanted to share was this. If someone tries to destroy you, document everything and expose them methodically. Do not suffer silently. Do not protect people who hurt you deliberately. Use every tool available, including publicity, legal action, and strategic exposure. You owe your betrayer nothing. You owe yourself everything. I also wanted to emphasize that revenge, when executed properly, is not about cruelty. It is about justice and accountability. I did not fabricate anything. I did not exaggerate. I simply showed everyone what Derek and Amber had done using their own evidence. Truth is not cruelty, even when truth is devastating. My life 5 years later was good and getting better. I had been promoted to vice president of marketing at my firm. I was dating someone wonderful who treated me with respect and honesty. I had strong friendships and chosen family who supported me. I had financial security and independence. I had built a life I was proud of from the ashes of betrayal. Derek and Amber's lives 5 years later were diminished and struggling. They both faced ongoing consequences of choices they made. This was not me being vindictive. This was natural consequence of a fair betrayal and public exposure of both. Actions have consequences. They learned this lesson expensively. I maintained good relationship with my father, who had ultimately chosen integrity over enabling Patricia's defense of Amber. We had grown closer after his divorce from Patricia. He told me he was proud of me for standing up for myself and refusing to be victim, that he wished he had protected me better from Amber's toxicity growing up. I told him I had learned to protect myself. 7 years after sending that presentation, I was invited to speak at a conference about women and financial independence in divorce. I shared my story about the affair, the documentation, and the public presentation. I talked about taking control of narrative and using strategic exposure for accountability. The response was powerful and emotional from the audience. I emphasized several key lessons. First, document everything always. Phone records, bank statements, credit cards, everything. You never know when you will need evidence. Second, do not confront until you have complete documentation and strategic plan. Confronting too early gives betrayers time to hide evidence or spin narrative. Third, use professional help. I had attorney and private investigator before I acted. This protected me legally and practically. Fourth, do not protect people who betray you. They chose to hurt you. Publicity is natural consequence of public behavior. Fifth, take care of your own financial security first. I moved money and secured assets before revealing what I knew. Sixth, choose your moment strategically. Revealing at my father's retirement party ensured maximum attendance and impact. The audience was people who knew us and could spread the story widely. Timing mattered enormously for effectiveness. Seventh, use your professional skills. My marketing background let me create polished, devastating presentation that was more effective than emotional confrontation would have been. I told the conference audience that betrayal is painful, but does not have to be disempowering, that we can choose to be strategic rather than reactive, that documentation and exposure are tools available to anyone who uses them carefully, that there is power in making truth public even when truth is painful. Many women approached me afterwards saying my story inspired them to stop protecting partners who betrayed them, that they were going to document expose and demand accountability rather than suffering silently, that seeing someone transform victimhood into agency gave them permission to do the same. This response made sharing my story worthwhile. I also spoke about forgiveness and whether I had forgiven Derek and Amber. I said honestly that forgiveness was complicated. I was not angry anymore. Anger had burned out years ago. But forgiveness implied releasing them from consequences. They still faced consequences of their choices. So perhaps I had released anger without granting forgiveness. Perhaps that distinction mattered. I thought Derek and Amber had likely suffered enough by natural consequences of their choices. Their reputations remained damaged. Their relationship failed. They struggled professionally and personally. I did not actively wish them further harm, but I also did not feel responsible for healing or helping them. They were simply no longer relevant to my life. The question people asked most often was whether I would do anything differently. I said no. Every choice I made, from documentation to investigation to presentation to divorce, was right for my circumstances. I would not change the public presentation. It achieved exactly what I needed it to achieve. Truth was established. Justice was served. I moved forward with power. Some people asked if I worried about Amber or Derek taking revenge on me for the presentation. I said I had considered that possibility, but assessed it as low risk. They were fundamentally cowardly people who acted in secret. Public exposure had defeated them completely. They had no energy for revenge, only for managing consequences they still faced. I also noted that any revenge they attempted would simply prove my point about their character. That documentary evidence of them taking revenge would justify everything I had done. They were smart enough to know this. So they stayed away, and I was fine with that. My current relationship was healthy and honest in ways my marriage to Derek never was. My partner knew my entire history, including the affair and presentation. He said I had handled it with impressive strategic thinking, that he would never betray me because he had seen what I was capable of when betrayed. This was said with respect and bit of humor. I appreciated both. I recognized that my story had become cautionary tale in certain circles. The viral video of my presentation was shown as example of what happens when you document thoroughly and choose public exposure. Derek and Amber were object lessons in how affair can destroy your entire life if victim refuses to stay quiet. I was fine being that cautionary tale. If my story prevented even one affair by making someone think twice about consequences, that was worthwhile. If my story empowered even one betrayed spouse to demand accountability rather than suffer silently, that was valuable. My pain had purpose beyond just my own healing. Looking back on receiving those 70 explicit photos, I remembered the moment clearly. The initial shock and nausea, the devastation of confirmed betrayal, the rage at Amber's calculated cruelty, but then almost immediately the cold strategic clarity. The recognition that she had handed me exactly what I needed for perfect revenge. The satisfaction of knowing I was going to destroy her, publicly using her own evidence. That transformation from victim to strategist happened in minutes. Some people process betrayal with tears and months of grief. I processed it with spreadsheets and presentation software. Neither response is wrong. They are simply different. For me, action was healing in ways passive grief never would have been. The presentation at my father's retirement party would be remembered by everyone who attended as long as they lived. Several attendees told me years later that they still thought about it, that they had never seen anything like it, that it was simultaneously horrifying and satisfying to witness, that they told the story to friends who had not been there because it was too remarkable not to share. My father told me the presentation changed how he thought about justice and family, that he had always believed family problems should stay private, that my presentation showed him sometimes public exposure is necessary for accountability, that he was proud I had stood up for myself so definitively. This validation from him meant more than he probably knew. Have you ever been betrayed by someone who expected you to suffer silently? How did you respond when someone deliberately tried to humiliate or destroy you? Would you have exposed affair publicly the way I did, or handled it differently? Share your experiences and thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, or taught you something about taking power back from people who betray you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about strategic justice and refusing to be victim. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that documentation and public exposure are valid responses to calculated cruelty, that you owe your betrayer nothing, and that silence protects perpetrators while publicity protects victims. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. I hope it reminds you that you have more power than you think when you are betrayed, that evidence and strategy can transform you from victim to agent, and that making truth public is sometimes exactly the right choice, even when others say it is too harsh. Stand up for yourself without apology, and let the consequences fall where they belong.